All right, welcome to some more foam rolling fun. Today we are going to focus on the quads and then kind of see where that takes us. Um, in general, everybody's body is made differently, so you might get a stretch in a completely different area. So I'm going to try to just keep everything. Let me get my watch started. Um, keep everything kind of general and doing the same amount of time. But when I do this for myself, like from my knees to like mid thigh, I don't really get much sensation. But then pretty much from like mid thigh to hips, it is just um, the apocalypse. So I will spend very little time typically in the spots that don't give me issues and spend a lot of time in the other spots. So we're going through things today. We're going to kind of hit everything. If you're not finding you get a lot of discomfort in that area, great. And if you find that you get more discomfort in another area, then you can always, if you're watching this at a later date, pause the video and spend some more time there so that you can get exactly what you need. So this is when I really enjoy having a shorter foam roll than the longer ones. It does have a drawback that I can't use it as much for chest opening, but I have lots of toys. So you can have more than one foam roller. But I do like a short one because it doesn't take up as much space, and because I'm going to be rolling essentially kind of keeping the end of the foam roll right in the midline of my body. And if I've got, 3 feet of foam roll hanging out, it's obnoxious. So we're going to start on the space just above our knee. So you can also do this with your therapy balls. We did this last month with therapy balls. So I'm putting my knee right on the edge, so essentially right there. Let me get my hands out of the way so you can actually see. So again, this is on the midline of my body. And I'm going to be rolling myself around, and to make it easier, I start way forward. And I set that in place. And then, the foam roll's on my left leg, my right leg melts down onto the floor. And I allow that right foot to pop up. And then I need to reposition, roll that down a little bit more. So I'm kind of just where the muscle starts to, so you've got like the soft spot right above your kneecap. And then you've got where the tissue of the quads really start. So you want to be right where that tissue kind of slopes up towards the belly of the quads. And this right here might be plenty. I ask you to just notice if the tendency is external rotation or internal rotation. Most likely it's external rotation. Try to get on the very center of that quad, so we're not internally or externally rotated and your pelvis is melting down. Now, if this is too intense in the low back because you don't have the flexibility in the low back, then go ahead and bring the hips up on a pillow. So bring the hip butt up to meet the foam roll as opposed to suffering. So sometimes this is just plenty here. This feels really great in my back, but I don't get a whole lot in my quad. And just like everything else, we pretty much go through the same motions. So I'm going to bend and release and flex and release. And I'm just going to go through those motions. Now, as you bend that knee, it's going to put more tension in the spine. So you might not be able to bend the leg all the way. That's fine. If it's not feeling comfortable, go flex and release, then don't do it. If it's just too much, or again, bring the hips up with a pillow. So these are the main 2 movements to start with. Use flex and release, bend and release. And then anywhere along this bend and release position, you can stop and windshield wiper. So we externally rotate, internally rotate. Okay, so windshield wiper, that might be all the way here, that might be here, that might be here, completely relaxed and straight out, that might be flexed. So there's lots of different ways to do this. And then sometimes as I'm rolling, it's like, okay, I roll, and then it's not uncomfortable, but I kind of roll over a tight muscle and I'm like, ooh, That's kind of tight there, but I don't have enough pressure. You can put your cat on the back of your knee, maybe, but that's not enough pressure with just my leg there alone. But if I hold in that position, so slightly externally rotated, where I find that tight muscle, and then I can flex and point, and that's going to gently massage that muscle, and then I can also bend the knee. So now I wish I had multiple camera angles. That would make this so much easier. But I'm externally rotated a little bit. So as I'm bending my knee, my left heel is kind of kicking over towards my right hip. So I want to keep everything in line with the joints. And I'm not getting a ton of sensation, but I definitely know that there's some massaging happening. Okay? So once again, our main movements are flexing the foot, relaxing, and then bending the knee and extending. And our options to do that are straight on, internally rotated, externally rotated. Okay? And we find that by windshield washing. We're just going to keep doing this all the way up the thigh. So from there, you engage your abdominals, pick your hips up off the mat, and you just roll down an inch or two. Okay? So we're taking this into a little bit more of a back bend. You can always drop down here and do the same thing. You're going to get less of a stretch through the hip flexors when you do this, but it's going to be more comfortable on your spine. So whatever you're looking for, we move in through our movements. We start off with just flexing the foot, relaxing, bending, releasing. And you can try bending with a soft foot and try bending with a flex foot. It's going to be different. You do this a couple times. So going through all the movements in every position is just for exploration. You find out what's tight, what's not tight. Windshield wiper, try it flexed, and try it with a relaxed foot. So here I get nothing as I externally rotate, but as I internally rotate, it's like, oh yeah, that's tender. So then I can stay kind of internally rotated, and it might feel more comfortable if I bend this right knee up on the outside. So I'm just gonna rotate for a second. You can see what that looks like. When I say bend the right knee up on the outside, it's just like this, okay? So that helps, I find, with the internal rotation situation. So wherever you find your best stretch. And then I just come right back into this bending of the knee and releasing. And as I give myself more space by lowering my chest down, I can actually get much deeper into that quad. So move yourself around, explore. That's the big thing with therapy balls and with the foam roll. It's just exploration. I give you a little roadmap, and you got to drive the stretching car. Whew. So you start to get into a little TFL and IT band on the outer hip, which we will focus solely on at some point. And then if you're internally or externally rotated, you're going to come back center. Lengthen the right leg down. And then roll yourself another inch or two. So now we're kind of like mid-thigh. Another thing is having the body upright, especially around here, starts to put more weight. So you can either keep that right leg, or that, how do we call it, the standing leg, I guess, toes on the floor, knee on the floor, or again, you can take it out to the side, or I like to tug it up here. I find that to be really supportive. Sometimes it doesn't allow me to get enough weight in the thigh though, so I need to kind of swing it out. Depends on my body and the day. So here, just completely relaxing is a pretty decent sensation. And I can do the same thing of flexing and pointing. And for me, as I work up the leg, I need to do less movement because it's already so intense for me. And this is a little bit of a core workout if you're holding yourself up. You can come all the way down as well, but I find that to be more uncomfortable in my body than the discomfort of doing a bunch of core work. I'm trying the windshield wiper. And for me, it's most sensitive right in the center. So I stay in the center and I keep moving. Find out where you're most sensitive and work through that part. And sometimes it is nice to kind of do a little micro windshield wiper, a little cross fiber work here. Just finding that most sensitive spot, so the most sensitive position with like your foot rotating. Stop there and windshield wiper. And then release that leg and roll yourself another couple inches. So for me, this is where it gets super tight. Sometimes I like to just relax into it. So again, finding out what works for your body. I know that in order for me to make it through a couple rounds of movements, I first have to ease myself in by surrendering to the pain. And then I slowly start to work my way in, flexing and pointing, engaging that quad when I flex the foot. So I'm not just flexing the foot, I'm engaging the whole leg. And then I can start in with bending. Then you windshield wiper, make sure you try that to see where you're most tender. Where you roll over something kind of hard, feels like a curve almost. And because our body is attached to itself, you might get things like, oh, I'm working in the middle of my thigh, but my knee's cracking. As we start to release these muscles and ligaments that go into the joints, you're going to notice that your joints feel better. And another move that I sometimes find is really helpful is to completely relax my leg and have my other leg back, and then I shimmy my pelvis. So what does that mean? It essentially means it's like belly dancing. If I can do it without my, so it's this action, belly dancing, cooling. Okay, so I'm just pulling one hip up and scissoring the pelvis side to side. So that might be another one that feels really good. And by really good, I mean really painful. And then we're going to roll up again. So we're starting to get to that sloping in towards the pelvis place. And again, I know that I need to go down here, but you can start wherever feels good for you. In order for me to get good pressure starting down here, I have to bring my leg up. Again, every body is different, so get creative, get explorative. Pointing and flexing, shimmying the hips, bending the knee, windshield wiping. Roll up. So we're now just shy of our hip crease. And I find that if I'm just shy of my hip crease and I'm up on my elbows and then I tip downwards, the foam roll kind of grabs hold of that tissue, and as my pelvis drops down, it pulls the tissue away from my pelvis, or rather, gravity pulls my pelvis away from the tissue. And that can be quite intense and lovely. And I find that as we get up towards the pelvis, there's just so many intricacies that you can spend forever here. I'm going to try to reel myself in today so we don't spend forever here. But when I'm doing this practice on my own, like I said, I brush through the first half of the quad and then I spend an hour up here. There's just so many little muscles, tendons, ligaments, so many places of intense sensation. Whew. And then we roll up right into that hip crease. So I'm about pubic bone height. My pubic bone actually bumps the foam roll. And playing around with where your torso and your leg are. You can usually just kind of drape everything over the foam roll at this point. But I find that I tip to my right side, so I use my right leg to kind of prop me up. And I let my hip rest on the foam roll, my knee be really heavy here. So I try to keep the knee heavy and send it towards the mat even as I bend the leg. And the same thing as I extend the leg. I keep the knee really heavy. And you will most likely feel this in your low back, because that's where these muscles end. Woo. And then you can also play with finding that really tight spot and then kind of tucking the tail and releasing the tail. So teeter-tottering almost, in addition to our windshield wiper. And sometimes as the muscle melts, you get to a whole other layer and you're able to just relax into it. So here I kind of suck my knee in, my right knee in, and roll myself outwards. So now I come up kind of on my side and I can roll back and forth. So I'm outside of the groin. I'm kind of right in line with the hip bone, as if the hip bone's pointing forward though. So I'm not like on the side. I am, if you find your hip bones bum, I'm like right here. Correct? So it's kind of where the quad comes up and attaches, little bits and pieces of it attach into the hip bone. And IT band comes up and your glutes are wrapping around. So this whole area between the hip bone, the greater trochanter, can be really sensitive. So I'm pulling my foot up now and rolling around. So you have to check and see what your body's capable of. And I'm rolling from my hip bone, like actually hip bone touching the foam roll, like 2 or 3 inches down, right to where my body's greater trochanter starts. I have a very narrow pelvis in the front, so my thigh bones plug into my pelvis a little more forward than other people's. I remember being a kid, and why you tell children this, I don't know, but this was, like my grandparents said this stuff to me. Like, oh, you've got good birthing hips. I'm like 10. But really, I don't. I have quite a narrow pelvis. I just have a big ass. So my thigh bones plug into the front of the pelvis, which can be deceptive. So now I want you to roll up to the hip bone, okay? And roll yourself over kind of under the side seam of your pant leg. So now for me, I'm right between my greater trochanter, right here, and the top of my pelvis. Like right, again, hip bone, midsection for my body. Your body might be a little bit different. And I'm starting to get into that glute here. So I can tip forwards and I can tip backwards. And I'm rolling essentially from tissue of the front of the hip, still possibly some quad action going on, to tissue of my deep six and glutes. And then you can also drop yourself down. Again, this works for my body. Everybody's body is different. And you can relax the foot down maybe and just pressure there. Now, I do like to take this leg out and kind of let it drop. So it drops as far as it can. And then I get a really nice stretch through this whole side body. That's just something I like to add. It may or may not work for you. You may or may not like it. So you do you. And then we're here. So let's do our IT bands. You're going to roll down. So you're right about your greater trochanter. You can roll side to side over that. So that always, I find, feels really good. And then roll just below the greater trochanter. And then kind of give it a forward and backward movement, side to side. So we tip in all directions. Again, it might feel awesome to drop your shoulder down. Might work for you, might not. You can add a little craziness here, start to bend that knee. That creates a little bit more leverage on the tissue, but also that tissue needs to stretch in order for you to bend the knee. So it's kind of healing the tissue. You're going to roll down. And for most of us, this is probably going to be plenty. You might soften the knee, which is going to create more weight. Again, if you pick that foot up and bend it straight back, that's going to create more weight. You can drop your shoulder down. It's going to create different weight. But it might be enough just to hang out right here. I mean, softening the knee might be way too much for some of us, because this is one of the most sensitive areas of the body. And it's also one of the areas that's the most tight. And then roll yourself down a bit more. So we've got that rocking from head to toe. We've got the rotation side to side. We've got relaxing the knee, relaxing the quad as much as possible to create more weight. We've got bending and releasing. We've got dropping down. So go through all of those. Stuck. Ugh. And see what trips your trigger. And try not to let your head and shoulders get all wonky when you do this. Keep the head heavy. Good. And then roll a little bit more. Now, this IT band area is kind of the opposite of the quad, where I find the quads tend to be really easy to get through in the lower half. The IT band is really where it hurts on the lower half, because we're all headed down into that knee. Oh. So the best I can usually do in this place for my body is just sit here and breathe and try to relax that whole bottom leg, because the leg wants to stay engaged to fight. So see if you can relax it. And then just keep relaxing, layers and layers of relaxing. relaxing. Oh, roll a little further down. Roll a little further down. And then roll a little bit more. We want to stay well above that knee. And then come all the way off the foam roll. Let's take a child's pose. Rock your hips side to side, and you should really be able to sense the difference between the two legs. That little bit of rotation, you can feel how tight the right hip is compared to the left. All right, let's do this on the other side. Whew. So I line this up with my midline, the edge of my knee. And we start all over. Flex the point, the bend, release. Feel windshield wiper. Looking for those areas of tension. And then working through them. And roll just a couple inches. Put yourself down. And start. Flex and point. Bend and release. Windshield wiper. And then roll. Remember, you always have the option to keep the hips up. Finding support with that left leg, however feels appropriate in your body. We have high winds here. It sounds like somebody's house just got blown over. Roll up. Running through all of the movements in your body. What feels good? Don't forget your little hip shimmy. That's something that works for you. Roll a little more. You're going to notice the two sides are probably very different, especially if you've ever had an injury on one side. I'm going to roll up again. So we're below that hip crease still. So the nice thing about rolling and not pressing, meaning I roll from position to position, so from here to here, is kind of like pushing toothpaste through your toothpaste tube. You push that tissue in front of you, continue to keep pressure, so you're kind of rolling the tension forward. And I find that if I pick up and move, it's a very different experience. It's definitely not as deep. Kind of like a rolling pin situation. Roll yourself up right into that. Actually, you're still just above that hip crease. So it's kind of where the real thickness of the muscle dissipates. And so, why are you feeling this in your low back? You might be questioning. I mean, aside from the fact that you're a little bit of a back bend. Main reason is because our quads lead into our hip flexors, which actually attach in two places. One is on the back side of the pelvis from the inside of the pelvis. So the inside of the pelvic bowl behind all of your organs. And the other one attaches right up here in your low back, where we always complain of low back pain. And our seated lifestyle does not help because it shortens those tissues. So when we come into back bends, we come into these kind of stretching positions, especially when we're putting pressure on the muscle tissue, we'll often feel it in our low back because it is causing that whole muscle to spasm, really. But I'll also oftentimes feel like I'm going to get an adjustment. Maybe sometimes I do, right at the top of the pelvis, even down into my sacrum. Now we're going to roll right up into that hip crease. And again, this is where I personally enjoy just kind of collapsing over top, dropping my knee down. And then trying to keep that knee heavy and bending and extending. And you've also kind of got your teeter-totter where you let the belly drop down and then you kind of tuck the tail under and round the low back, arching the low back, rounding the low back like a cat-cow. Or what kills me is the bending and stretching. Keep your knee heavy. And then I'll roll right up in line with my hip bone. And start to send myself outwards. So kind of first that 45-degree Give it a wiggle, and then make your way right onto your side, so your side seam. And if you rock back and forth here, you go more towards that quad. And as you roll back here, more of the glutes. So just back and forth. We'll get into the glutes next week. You still have this IT band. Oh, the fun IT band. So now you're going to stand on your side and you're just going to roll over, over that greater trochanter. So for me, on the other side, going back and forth over top of that greater trochanter wasn't that uncomfortable. But this side makes me consider taking my leg off. So again, some of us are plugged in a little bit more side to side with our greater trochanter. Some of us are a little more forwards. That's where I am. Some of us are a little more backwards. Those people that can like spread out into a side split and roll all the way through, they're either straight into the side or more towards the back. I will never be in a straddle split. I have come to accept that. I get about 90 degrees out of my hip joints, and it's not muscular, it is 100% structural. So now roll over that greater trochanter. So we're below it. Again, front and back, side to side. And you can maybe just relax the leg. That might be another option. So just letting your knee be kind of heavy. And then there's also the thing of picking up that foot and bending and stretching. Creates a little bit of pressure. A little bit further. Rolling and rocking. And rolling. Now we're about mid thigh. Rolling and rocking. Take down a little more. Ooh. A little bit more. A little more. So now we're just above that knee. That's enough of that nonsense. Let's roll into child's pose. Rock side to side. And then come up onto all fours. Let's do a couple rounds of cat and cow. And if it feels good to you, you can take a downward facing dog. Just bending one knee and then the other. I find that after I roll my T-bends, this is one of the greatest places to be. It just feels so different to have those side legs opened up. It's amazing how much they restrict our movement. Then go ahead and come around. Take your hips up onto the foam roll. So if you've got a long foam roll, that's where this having long foam roll is really ideal. Because you can drop back and your whole spine is on the foam roll. If you don't, and my little therapy ball is not here with me today, nor are my yoga blocks. All right. Meditation cushion it is. So that's how I'm going to extend my foam roll today. It's not going to be perfect, but it is what it is. So my tailbone's right at the edge. I lie back. And then either just outstretching your arms or taking it into cactus arms, which is my personal favorite. Another way to do this particular pose is if you've got one of those big rolling fitness balls. So do it that way. Same thing, but less passive. So rolling gently off the side of your foam roll. Slowly bring yourself back up to seated. And it makes my seated position so much easier to work on those hips, quads, and IT bands. So next week we are going to get into the rest of our hips, so our glutes. We'll do a little hamstring work, try to fit in some inner thigh work, and some additional passive back bending with the foam roll. So thank you guys so much for rolling out with me today. Appreciate it. See you next week for our last foam rolling class this month. Namaste.